Gordon. So welcome everyone. My name is Mary Eleanor Power and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for Dalhousie University's College of Continuing Education. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. And I would like to welcome all of you to today's webinar, Wicked Civic Challenges. I want to introduce you to Gordon McIntosh, who is an instructor with Dalhousie University's College of Continuing Education in the local government program. I'd also like to introduce you to Chris Bone, Senior Manager of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships at the City of Prince George, and also Annette Sharkey, who's the Executive Director of Social Planning Council for North Okanagan. So I will leave it there with short introductions and am delighted to pass it on to Gordon to get us started. And thanks very much everyone for joining us. Gordon.
Well, thanks so much, Mary Eleanor. And again, just to reiterate, I'm just delighted. I know we happen to all be from British Columbia, but yeah, so be it. These are the two best people I thought of inviting. Because, you know, whenever we do maybe a concept or a new idea, a tool, I think for a lot of us, it's really beneficial to hear a real life example. And that's what Chris and Annette offer us today. So I'm really delighted. So we're going to talk about the nature of wicked challenges, really the need to be perhaps, if not rethinking, at least adding to our toolkit around strategic thinking, and you can call it strategic thinking, strategic planning, strategic management, all kinds of community development, all kinds of different words. But, you know, for years, at least as long as I've been working in local government, we often think about strategic planning, perhaps as a linear process. You know, we start with a vision and we kind of work our way through and we produce this magical strategic plan. And perhaps it gets cascaded beyond vision, mission, and goals into strategies and, golly gee, action plans and performance plans. But, you know, many of our issues today in local government are very complex. Well, first of all, they know no boundaries, watersheds, economic resilience, etc. No geographic boundaries. They're quite artificial, causing across the country a lot of thinking around regional collaboration, regional cooperation, interagency partnerships. The second is often, like we're finding even in departments, you know, with budgets, et cetera, issues don't land in any particular function. They land across functions. So whether it's food scarcity, truth and reconciliation, you know, different issues, climate change, they impact, for example, climate change, impact finance, they impact infrastructure, they impact planning, every area. And so they're not as isolated within a particular function, if you will. And also the issues themselves are intertwined and interrelated. So a lot of complexity. Second point, just to build the case for adding to your toolkit or thinking about strategic work that we do. There was a concept some while ago, Scientific Revolution by Kuhn, who talked about paradigm shift, very slow moving shifts in society. And perhaps we're seeing that certainly, around the environment over time. It's very pronounced now, but I can remember 20 years ago, it was just a gradual thing as we began to try and sell recycling. Or we see societal changes, demographic changes, et cetera. So there are slow moving shifts that are going on. And of course, there's inflection points. These, of course, we well know as COVID, but there are other significant events, whether it be Black Lives Matter, incidents that bring our attention to Indigenous rights and truth and reconciliation, et cetera. So there are two types of change that are going on that also cause us to think about how we approach things. And you can add to our list, by the way, of issues that you see. Well, lo and behold, not only are these issues very complex, slow moving or rapid, intertwined, but they're on our front doorstep. We are, in local government, regional government, Indigenous government, we are the front line. And so notwithstanding federal, provincial governments' offers for assistance, to be able to download or offload programs and provide funding, at the end of the day, we're often, and I see this, many councils across the country struggling relative to their mandate. What's our role in dealing with homeless? What's our role in dealing with domestic violence or climate change or housing, et cetera? So, by way of introduction, hopefully I've captured your position, your area, and we can begin to think perhaps we need to rethink our approaches, or we need to add to our toolkit. So I'm not for a minute suggesting we need to trash the work that we do, but perhaps we need to add some tools to our strategic toolkit. And with that in mind, we thought, let's go right to 2 examples, and then we'll unpack some ideas around social innovation and collective action. There are a lot of other words around this, but those are the 2 that we'll use today. Social innovation, a more organic, evolving process, and second, collective action, requiring the collaborative effort more than just a city, more than a municipality, more than a county. And so with that in mind, let's start with Vernon. And Annette, tell us just a little snippet to tease us of what are you doing in Vernon?
Sure. So Vernon, for those of you that don't know, is a smaller community in the Okanagan Valley. We have approximately 40,000 people. We're on the traditional unceded territory of the Okanagan Nation. I absolutely love Vernon. I grew up here, but I sometimes refer to us as the poor cousin. We're between Kelowna and Kamloops, and they often get the senior level of government funding. So we really do rely heavily on our partners and our resources. We have to be, flexible and maneuverable for sure. The main social issues in Vernon, those complex problems, really homelessness, the opioid crisis, and definitely health inequities due to racism and poverty. So those are kind of the main areas. For us in Vernon, we have a hybrid model. So the city is actually the funder, and I work for a nonprofit called the Social Planning Council. And it really helps because I can be something of a chameleon. So I can be embedded in the city, reporting to city council, working with city staff. But because I'm not actually a municipal employee, I can then also be very much out in the community and have a lot more flexibility. So the Social Planning Council really is that backbone agency. And then we have a group called the Partners in Action, and they're kind of that implementation model or the arm that's doing the work out in the community. So as I said, this model, I think it really works for city council. They can still be a bit hands-off, but yet be at the table and be an active partner in the planning.
Thanks, Annette. And we're going to unpack this a little more. So great little backdrop. Chris, now you are an employee of the city. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in Prince George.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's really nice to be joining colleagues from across the country. Pretty exciting for me, for sure. So Prince George is a mid-sized city of about 80,000 people, right in north central British Columbia. So we are a service hub that provides a place for many communities to the northwest and northeast of us. We have lots of services in Prince George, health, employment, otherwise. And as a service hub, we're finding that we're really dealing with increasingly challenging civic issues. And as such, we chose to take a little different approach as local government by testing whether or not a local government could serve as a backbone organization on collective initiatives to try to address some of the upstream mitigation options in relation to these complex social issues like crime, like poverty, like homelessness, like substance use. So it's been a really interesting process, and I think one that is quite palatable for local government because it's really about facilitating others and facilitating a movement around a shared agenda.
So we're going to unpack these a little bit. It's great to have Chris and Annette to apply some of the concepts. So one of the questions often I hear is, why do we need something different? Well, I don't know about you, but for a lot of organizations, councils, it's just, oh no, we're going to do one more strategic planning process. And the gag comes out, and golly gee, we're going to have another plan sitting on the shelf. And both Annette and Chris have highlighted, often it's not only the municipality that needs to move things forward. We need to be able to mobilize people. Not only, and often we have awesome processes to engage people, to get their input, maybe even to get their feedback. But really what Chris and Annette are talking about is, how do we actually involve them in mobilizing not only citizens, community groups, businesses to do something? Well, why? Well, I haven't been one place yet in the world, in Canada, that says, bring it on. We're looking for more stuff to do. We're over capacity. So as these wicked challenges become more and more complex, more prevalent, we have limited capacity. And so we need to get creative. Yeah, are we just going to raise taxes, or are we going to look for that money under the rainbow, that if only we could get more money from foundations or government? So looking to really mobilize resources. So if we've made the argument, hopefully, that we're on the front line, we've got a lot of complex problems, and we have limited capacity, how do we get started? What is the key, I guess, to thinking about social innovation, to thinking about moving towards collective action? I wanted to focus on two parts. One is the organization, because we're actually talking about doing something different. And second, really talking about resource acquisition as a potential. So I'm going to start with Annette, and just actually just the opposite, sorry. It was really about Chris, because from a municipal point of view. Sorry, I missed you. So from a local government point of view, what would be the rationale? What is the readiness required to be able to take a social innovation approach?
Well, I think you've touched on a lot of the key points, Gord. First of all, I think for local government, it's really important to be able, for particularly elected officials, to be able to frame the complex issues in a way that makes sense for local government. So in essence, what aspects of the challenge relate to civic priorities, and how can we start to get some civic buy-in, both on the elected and administrative side, because they see alignment with priorities and the direction of the city. I also think it's really critical to demonstrate some quick wins. So one of our observations with our collective impact work has been that it's a process and it takes time. And often the 4-year political cycle doesn't like to let processes unfold or for movements to sort of get underway. So as a facilitator of community collective action, we found it's really valuable to say, what can we demonstrate immediately that says, hey, we're on the right path and there's some value in doing this. I think as well, it's really critical to position your work with local government as not the doer, but as the facilitator. I think what we're finding is that, yes, there is a lot of sensitivity around downloading from other governments to do work in this area. And I think there's a real drive to do the work because the citizens expect local government to do the work. So to create that readiness is to demonstrate that the city can play a role in facilitating as opposed to doing. And I think the other thing that helps create readiness, as Gord touched on earlier, is to really drive home the point that these issues cut across all city departments and city operations. So by starting to look at dealing with complex issues in innovative ways, you're actually promoting that integrated leadership from within that really can support so many other activities within local government. So I'll leave it there, Gordon.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think my observation is one of the when we try something different, like engaging other parties, there is an element for a municipality to give up a bit of control over the process, over the outcomes. Why? Because we need to involve other stakeholders, and I know, Annette, you've gathered an awesome group of people, but when we start talking about stakeholders. What do you find as maybe some of the areas of resistance, or how do you get them on side to be all sort of working together and not have too many outliers?
Yeah, I think building on what Chris was saying, that really to have people being willing to engage, they need to see some results. They need to kind of see why are they there and how is this model going to help them. So I think those early wins, we really need to celebrate that. We had one of our first action teams with our model back in 2008 was to get a 75% discount at our recreation services for people who are on a low income. And we've had almost 1,500 people access that program annually. And I still bring up that program every year. We review it, we celebrate it. We went, wow, look, that's 10 years ago, and look how many people have benefited from that. I think we also really need to respect people's time and the organizational capacity. So with our model, we have about 20 organizations on our coordinating meeting. That's the group, I call them the usual suspects, that kind of meet every month. But with our action teams, we've had about 150 different organizations and businesses come. And they're only there for a very specific reason and for a short period of time. So they get to see the results, see what the outcome is, and then go away. We don't ask them to be involved on that monthly sort of bigger picture role. And I think then that builds the trust. It's like, okay, you're going to respect my time. I'm going to see something specific happen, and you're not going to sort of drag me into a longer process. I also report regularly to City Council, and I really try to show with City Council the return on their investment in this process. So I do a lot of the business case, talk about the capital projects that we've brought in, the job creation, and the new programs we've been able to get funding from senior levels of government for because of that collective action. So those would be some of the things that I would talk about when we're looking at the willingness for people to be at the table.
And it sounds like it's not only willingness to get them to have that initial discussion, to unpack things, but also to sustain. And what I'm hearing you say is sometimes you just have to get people involved for their specific area of interest, as opposed to sticking with it for life. Yeah, good point. Well, that begs the question of what are some key steps? How to really get started. And of course, we'll unpack this in the upcoming course with at Dalhousie around strategic imperatives or dealing with wicked challenges. But maybe just a quick overview, Chris, of what are some key steps that you find? I know you're a student of social innovation. What are some key steps involved in the process?
Yeah, certainly. So with our Raise Up a Kids initiative, one of our first steps was actually to do a bit of a scan across the country and into the States about who is doing this kind of work. And what we learned was that the Tamarack Institute is what is sort of the Canadian guidance, if you will, with some step-by-step processes, like how do you do this? So I think one of the first things is you can't force collective impact. You have to sort of work with community to ensure that there's a shared aspiration to move forward and that people see value in the direction of the collective impact initiative. So in our case, we were able to say, rather than always trying to address horrible Maclean's magazine headlines about being one of the most dangerous cities, why don't we start to look at what's creating some of the trajectories there? And it was that idea in our community that, hey, we all have a shared aspiration to improve children's health generally, that was a key step. I think also a key step is really trying to understand how the different players are going to commit to the process, how they're going to be accountable, and how we're going to have some shared measurement of whether we're going in the right direction. And certainly there's a responsibility to really highlight what are those high leverage opportunities. So what can you grab onto really quickly that will actually contribute to building the momentum for the collective action? And then I think probably it's no surprise that really this has to be a pretty inclusive process. So as Annette mentioned, there might be a core group of organizations that are leading and facilitating and regularly meeting, but you always have to have your radar up to see who else can be part of this, maybe some of the more unusual suspects. And then finally, knowing that whenever you mobilize organizations or individuals in a shared direction, somebody has to support the work. And sometimes that support isn't particularly glamorous. It's sending out the meeting invitations, making sure the notes are taken, setting up Zoom meetings. But in the absence of that glue, collective action can't usually be sustained.
Well, nice segue, Chris, into the need for somebody to be coordinating, right? Some nice setup for Annette to talk about coordination and sustaining the initiative with, an eclectic group of people. Annette?
Yeah, and Chris, thank you. The unglamorous support, that is my full-time job. And really, community development and social innovation can't happen off the side of people's desks. It is a full-time commitment for sure. So in Vernon, with the Partners in Action model, we've had it in place since about 2008. We launched it then as a pilot just to see, would this actually work? So we have a coordinating committee, as I said, that's probably about 15 to 20 kind of those core groups. But then we call them the worker bees, is the action teams. And we could have anywhere between 10 to 15 action teams going on at any given time. And hopefully my job is to make sure they're feeding into those bigger strategic plans that I'm watching and monitoring and making sure that this all makes sense. So again, my role, yeah, definitely I'm making sure those action teams have clear goals, they have work plans, there's an evaluation component, I'm coordinating the committee, doing the notes, and just being that connector, making sure that everything makes sense. So I'm kind of that hub, our organization is that hub. Since 2008, we've had about 200 action teams and with, as I said, about 150 different organizations. So the scope is really wide. My job is to make sure that it's all sort of contained and tracked and we can easily see the results of these action teams. One of the things I wanted to say about our model is we definitely are open to fail. So we figured we had about 50% of our action teams that got some real traction or some real positive outcomes, and the rest we were like, yeah, it didn't go exactly the way that we thought, but what can we learn from that? And I think that's a key with that social innovation, is being willing to try something new, to do a pilot, to see, what are those unintended consequences of that policy and to work through that. And again, it's that trust with your partners that it's okay to try something new and maybe it won't work, but maybe we've hit gold and something that's really stuck with the community and had a real impact. So yeah, I would say with this model, you do have to have that commitment. That's where the city is the funder for the model. And as Chris said, the city and the municipality aren't the doers. They're providing the framework, the support for the facilitation. But the partners in action, they are the doers. It's those action teams, those worker bees that are getting things done. And we're attracting the funding from senior levels of government or the collaboration that's happening in the community.
Well, I think Annette, you make for me, two significant points. One, to get it started, you have a kind of a leap of faith. You need some quick wins. But really the whole idea of social innovation is it is organic. They're pilots, some fail, some have some successes, we learn, et cetera. And I thought maybe just before we go with our last little piece, something we hadn't scripted, but maybe for some of our listeners, we need to hear what were some of those action teams. Give us some examples of some of the things you're so proud of. And I'm going to come back to Chris as well. What have been some of the projects, and good or bad, failures or otherwise? That's good. Yeah. So Annette, you want to start us off with?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when COVID hit in March, it was just like, whoa, our shelters looked like they were going to close. The too small, confined spaces. What are we going to do? And again, it was, that 10 years of collaboration and phone calls and very quick action. And the municipality did take a leap of faith. They gave us the curling rink facility, and it was a big ask for our action team to come to the city. And, the first question was, are other municipalities doing this? Maybe not, not yet anyway. And Vernon did jump in, and they gave us that facility. So we were able to combine both shelters into one larger space. It could have been a disaster. There were lots of questions whether this was going to work or not. But as I said, that trust that we had, it was like, we got to try something. What we've seen is an amazing result. So our numbers of people sleeping outside has been cut in half. And that's a combination of that combined shelter in the municipal space, plus BC Housing getting some motel rooms. We never would have anticipated that COVID would actually have reduced our homeless issues, and the business community is feeling it, residents are feeling it. So it's turned out to be a huge win, but it was a huge leap of faith, and our municipality was nervous about it. So kudos to them for trusting us, trusting partners in action and that action team, and being willing to go through with a pretty big ask.
Well, and I remember when we came to Vernon for the Dalhousie program and did an interview, we had, I think, about 9 people in the room, including our CMP, et cetera. And if I recall, Annette, I hope I've got this right, there was folks on spokes.
Yes. Yeah. So
I just thought that was, wow, what a cool idea. Tell us about that, and then we'll go to Chris.
Yeah, so Folks on Spokes, it was actually based on something that was happening. I can't remember which community. We stole it and adapted it, but we actually pay people with lived experience to be in the downtown and to be working with businesses to clean up hot spots. And that's, again, built real trust between service providers and the business community, where there is tensions there for sure. And interestingly enough, we now have Folks on Spokes working with the neighborhood where this combined shelter is. So again, the city's providing more support and resources for this sort of new combined shelter, and Folks on Spokes are building relationships with the neighbors as well.
Nice, nice. Chris, some examples of what's happening in Prince George.
I'm going to try to wrap this all up in a nice bow. So I talked about our Raise Up Our Kids initiative, and because of the collective action around that, we were able to attract a pretty significant 5-year funding commitment from the federal government to work on a strengthening families programs in some of the schools. Because the city helped to administer and manage that funding, we were eligible for an administrative fee. So rather than taking that administrative fee in-house, we leveraged those dollars to have some wins around COVID-19.
Nice.
And one of those wins was looking at, as Annette has mentioned, what are some of the gaps? And one of the biggest gaps we had in our community was the lack of public washroom access, particularly for individuals living on or close to street. So we engaged an organization that employs substance users to provide the oversight for the washroom. So not only were we able to utilize funding that was supporting another initiative, we were able to employ individuals and test how we might be able to build on what we've learned through that employment and expand it in other areas. And more importantly, we were able to provide a pretty critical service to people in need. So when I think about being adaptable and flexible and leveraging, I can't think of a better example than the one I just provided to say, when you've got the right people at the table, always thinking about opportunity, leveraging, how to adapt, be flexible, and not get too mired down in process, the outcome it's usually positive. And did we learn stuff? Oh yeah, we did. But it was good learning.
Thanks, Chris. Well, the big word that I'm hearing is it's all about alignment. It's about getting multiple parties. Well, first of all, within your own organization, to mobilize internal effort, but then to mobilize towards whether it's a specific project like Annette talked about, task force by task force, or overall about the having a healthy community and people working towards that. Let's end with a couple, just maybe a snippet or two around for our participants who are individual civic leaders. Any hints around Annette, leadership from an individual point of view? If you do want to take a collaborative, social innovation, collective action approach, any keys that you find from a personal leadership point of view, capabilities that you need?
Yeah, I think building that trust is key. So for me, consistency. So following up, I have 5,000 balls in the air, but I try and track every single one because you never know when you're going to need somebody. So again, it's like building that trust. I'm there, I'm consistent. Meeting organizations where they're at. So there could be some organizations that you feel should be taking a lead on something, but maybe the capacity isn't there. So trying to get funding or not have expectations beyond what the organization is ready and able to do. Remaining neutral, that's a really tough thing when you're the social planning council, but really we have to listen to all perspectives, and there's some pretty contentious social issues out there. So it's how do you keep trust with all parties, and celebrating. We need to celebrate when we have those wins, and that's something I really try and do, is just instill pride about what we're doing in our community.
So it's just some basic life learning leadership skills, right? So it's not a big secret, although we can use resources, lots of resources online. We've got a lot in the upcoming program, but Chris, you mentioned Tamarack, some awesome online resources around this. But we've also mentioned that these things can fail. From an organizational point of view, some closing remarks around what's needed organizationally to make sure that this doesn't kind of proceed and then kind of flop. Chris?
A couple of things. First of all, buy-in is essential at local government, both from elected officials and also senior administration. I think it's also critical to always work across divisions and departments, that always has to be your communication frame of reference. And to always think of communicating in terms of managing, mitigating, facilitating the assistance of others, not ending or resolving a complex issue as local government. And I think I've highlighted this several times: be flexible and adaptable as an organization and as an employee within a civic government organization, always trying to find ways to demonstrate the value of that flexibility and adaptation.
Well, you make a good point, Chris, that complex problems often are not solvable. We can only move towards reduction, mitigation, et cetera. These are very complex. Often our strategic planning processes say, here's a goal, here's an end in sight, and we have a target to complete it, right? These complex problems are, they prevail. So for those, listening, this has just been kind of a tip of the iceberg. Lots of different learning. We have a 10-week program. A couple of you that are online have taken it, Rethinking Community Resilience. It's around introducing concepts, tools around social innovation, collective action. How it works is we cover some basics, we cover some tools, but I think the most enjoyable part for me is working in cohorts all across the country. We have small teams. Usually we have 25 or so people, teams of 5 all over the country, who then collectively work as teams, applying these concepts, applying these tools to real issues facing local government, and in particular, real issues that they're facing. I've been a delight that some participants say after the course, they were able to go back to their own organization and make some specific recommendations regarding climate change or issues they were facing. So we don't want to take too much more time of anybody. I want to thank you very much. I want to say a big thank you to Annette Sharkey from City of Vernon in the Vernon area with the society there. Chris Bone from Prince George, working with the city. Myself, living in North Saanich, just a delight. I hope you'll check it out, if not for yourself, for some of people you know or people who work in your organization. Check out the Dalhousie program. This has been the second part. We did a session a while back called I did a cross-country review of the top trends in Canada, top issues and opportunities. So if you want to hear more about that, just pop me an email. Happy to share that. We've got some notes on that. And again, over to you, Mary Eleanor. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Gordon. Thanks very much. And yes, so as Gordon mentioned regarding email, so we will be sending an email around later this afternoon to all of you who attended today, as well as all of our registrants, that will include a recording of the webinar. So if you wish to pass that along to other colleagues, family or friends, feel free to do so. As well, we'll be including Gordon's email address, and Chris and Annette have agreed to include their email address as well. So if you have any questions coming out of today's webinar, please feel free to reach out to them. And as Gordon mentioned, this webinar really acts as a teaser and introduction to the course that he mentioned, and we will be including a link to the course as well in that email. So please keep your eye out for it. Thank you very much, Gordon, Chris, and Annette, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for being part of today's webinar. I would encourage you, before you officially leave Zoom, that you fill out the survey that you'll be prompted to fill out before you leave. And it's just a good way for us to hear how today's session went and any feedback that you might wish to offer. So thank you very much again, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.